Hello and good morning. Back at the Sallah, so to say. My name is Ayama Kende, and this is Sunrise Daily. You are welcome. Well, naturally, what else would you expect on such a day as this but to check around what are the things that have been happening as far as Sallah is concerned. There's been celebration all over the nation. So why don't we begin by taking a look at one of those celebrations across a number of states in Nigeria.
The Kufa Arewa Eid prayer ground in Daura, Katsina State is agog on the morning of the Eid al-Kabir following the arrival of the President Muhammadu Buhari. Hundreds of residents, including the Emir of Daura, His Royal Highness Umar Farouk, and other traditional and religious leaders, take part in the communal Rakat prayers led by the Chief Imam Alhaji Safiyanu Dansawai. Allahu Akbar. The current insecurity in the country inspired calls for special prayers by the Emir of Daura, who directs residents to persistently pray for a successful conclusion of the president's tenure in office. On the side, 2 white rams, symbolic of the festival of sacrifice, is slaughtered by the president. Beyond the celebration, what seems to resonate more for the president is getting rid of the bandits.
Those that are distracting the attention of governments at all levels, local, state and federal, they live among them, they know them, let them expose them, so that we can have peace in the country. Well, what every Nigerian needs is peace now, so that they can go back to their farms, they can go around peacefully, and it's up to Nigerians to mobilize themselves and get rid of the bandits.
Based on reports from the Presidential Economic Council of an abundance of arable land, the president is asking more people to embrace farming.
They came out with a figure that really overwhelmed me, that not more than 2.5% of Nigerian cultivable land is being cultivated. Not more than 2.5%. Everybody has rushed into the cities and towns to make noise, or there's a lot of land to be cultivated.
On the streets of Daura, a throng of residents cheer on and for the moment oblivious of their present challenges. The presidency believes that in spite of the prevailing security challenge, support by Nigerians can engender more action by the government to resolve the myriad of challenges in the country. Gloria Umezuke, Channels Television News.
There is no doubt that one thing that is central to the message of this season is that of sacrifice, and of all, that you would observe in that report. The symbolic part is where the president, slaughtered 2 rams right there as, a symbol of the season. But the sacrifice part, and that is something that I'm still wondering how we're even going to wrap our heads around it. Markwe, good morning.
Good morning, Ayo. I'm sure that Nigerians are already used to, sacrifice. However involuntary the sacrifice is, I think that is something that we've just had to accept as a part of what it is that we do. In some faiths, sacrifice is also a part of accepting whatever comes to you. Is a part of sacrifice. In some faiths now, you're being told, oh, you don't have to suffer and smile. In some other faiths, you're told, accepting whatever it is that comes to you is a part of sacrifice. Being able to offer up things that are dear to you, you know, for the good of others or for the sake of, for the ones that you love, is also a part of sacrifice. So almost on a daily basis, you know, for those who have families, however small, you know, however distant, and are willing oftentimes to give something away. The question is whether we have now imbibed that spirit of sacrifice for someone who is not related to us, for those who are not related to us, and for country. Apart from those who serve diligently in the armed forces where sacrifice is demanded, the very fact that you join a country's armed forces in the first instance already means that you're willing to give up your life for that country. There have been huge questions as to what the rest of us are willing to do for Nigeria. And I think that is where you know, there is a disconnect of some sort. How we bring matters pertaining to our faith to bear on matters relating with how we feel about this country. I do know that, you know, time does take its toll on a lot of us. The way I felt about Nigeria is not when I was much younger. It's not exactly the way I feel right now. There have been times when I have been hugely disappointed. There have been times when I have felt, you know, that things were going to get better. I felt that, you know, however it is, you know, maturity has also set in some instances. But the thing that keeps driving the question I ask myself every day about this country is, what sort of country do I want to leave for my children? What sort of country do I want my grandchildren, for instance, to have? And I think that those are the kind of questions that should drive our conversations with sacrifice. Yes, we're told whatever it is we're told in our faiths, but somehow we need to bring that to bear on our relationship with Nigeria. If we truly care about this country, we need to be able to give up things, you know, for the betterment, for the future. Ibrahim in the Quran, I think, is the leader of both Abrahamic faiths. You know, the Christians call him their father in faith. The Muslims too have absolute regard for him. That's the reason why they're celebrating his faith in God. He was rewarded for his faith. I believe that somehow, you know, I mean, he became the father of nations. That was the part of the reward that he got. He became the father of nations. I believe that if we're able to bring that to bear from our faiths into our country, who knows what we might be rewarded with. But until we address that disconnect, I don't know what will be of this country of ours, and, you know, how we will continue to relate, you know, what it is that we profess, religious as we are, and how we explain where it is we currently are as a people, despite all that we profess, that we say we believe.
You know, while as you started to talk about our faith and all of that, I recall that we have a section in the Constitution that talks about faith. Section 15 of the Constitution says clearly, subsection 1, the motto of the Federal Republic of Nigeria shall be unity and faith, peace and progress. And it goes on to talk about in subsection 2, national integration shall be actively encouraged, whilst discrimination on the grounds of place of origin, sex, religion, status, ethnic or linguistic association or ties shall be prohibited. How we action these words, that's another thing altogether. And about the sacrifice, exactly what are you willing to give up? Sacrifice shouldn't only guide our conversations, as you have rightly said. Sacrifice should guide our actions, should guide our decisions, should guide the laws that we make, the action that governments at various levels take. Because while we ask for the people to make sacrifices, and the people feel that the leadership is not making enough sacrifices, there's a big question mark. Who's going to answer that question? I guess it's left for us to see. In the meantime, the papers definitely captured events that took place all over the nation yesterday. So let's take a look at some of them.
And yes, this is deliberate because we're still in the season of the holidays, and as much as possible, let us see whether we can really free our heads, you know, of things that sometimes get us worried, that you know, make us think of become anxious, make us become anxious. I think that leadership has this one that is a bit calming this morning. Muslims observe peaceful Sallah amid security challenges. So thankfully, all went well yesterday. No bombs going off anywhere, no serious incidents is reported anywhere. That's the lead headline on the front page of Leadership. Muslims observe peaceful Sallah amid security challenges. Governors Abdulsalami, others reiterate call for peace and to insecurity. Police rescue 100 victims from bandits' den in Zamfara. PMB gives core members 1 million naira, 2 cows, 20 bags of rice. Yes, usually coppers will go to visit the president in his hometown. Yeah, we'll look through the other dailies, you might see a few pictures depicting that. And that's what he gave them when they came to visit. He gives core members 1 million naira, 2 cows, 20 bags of rice. You also see there, Nigeria to leverage ECOWAS network to boost trade volume. And a number of other stories at the bottom there. Forget 2023, presidency tells PDP, says you can't dismantle PMB's political structure. Okay, so there's also a bit of politics going on. Conversations are already in top gear amongst the political parties and within them as well. Federal government must address hardship faced by Nigerians. That's from the Sultan of Sokoto. It's a page 6 read for you. And just in case you might want to look through this, Tokyo 2020 football, softball events begin today. Yes, our crew, yes, they've been in Tokyo since Monday or so. Yes, since Sunday. They're about over the weekend. They arrived over the weekend. And events are already being kick-started. Football, softball events begin today. It's a page 30 read for you. Let's leave it there for Leadership newspapers.
And switch to the Vanguard newspaper this morning, which is speaking in the same breath as the Leadership newspaper, but from a completely different angle. Nigerians unsafe, hungry. Sultan, ACF, tell FG others. Story is on page 3. Address poverty, insecurity for sustainable unity. Sultan tells leaders. Those troubling Nigeria's peace will be fished out, Buhari vows. Shocked that only 2.5% of Nigeria's arable land is cultivated. I heard this about 2 weeks or so ago, and even what's even worse is that, you know, that economist said in that interview that only 20% of Nigeria's land space is even in use at all for anything. And the last of the riders there, as Zulum seeks support to end insurgency. Find all of that details, all of the details on page 3 of the paper this morning. And right under the picture you see there, extradition battle looms over Sunday Igboho's arrests. Stories on page 5. The story broke a little while ago, and there's been a lot of talk around that one. Find the details on the inside pages this morning. And right above the nameplate, a lot of messages there pointing to Eid Kabir and so many others. CBN power sector intervention loans hit 1.3 trillion naira. That's what you have right there on the front page of the Vanguard newspaper.
Trust has very interesting headlines on their front page. They're looking for happy headlines. Well, headlines are really happy, but take a look at this one. Buhari vows to fish out troublemakers as federal government moves to extradite Igboho. How Interpol arrested agitator wife in Cotonou. That's what you find on the front page of Daily Trust newspapers. That's what I'm reviewing. Hopefully that should show up soon. Don't surrender him. He won't get justice in Nigeria. That's from his lawyer. Arrest won't stop secession agitation. That's from Ladoja. DSS keeps mum. Those are the lead stories there. On the front page of Daily Trust, you have a number of other stories. Sallah, celebrants flout COVID-19 protocols despite third wave threats. Whew. Such a killjoy, this COVID-19. Page 4 will give you details of that. What do we do? I mean, huge questions as to whether or not, how people can celebrate safely. Huge questions. Banditry, protect farmers to avoid famine. Sultan urges. And you also see there, banks yet to meet CBN's threshold on female board management members in 7 years. Yes, in recent times, there was something to celebrate that at least 6 banks now have female managing directors, and it's unprecedented in the banking industry. So much as we're making good strides, it would seem that a lot more still needs to be done in the banking sector. And this story, page 14, will give you details. Banks yet to meet CBN's threshold on female board management members in 7 years. So hopefully something will happen with the banks and maybe also in government, because we need to be moving forward, not going backwards. Look at this at the bottom here. You have a number of stories. Of course, that picture worth 1,000 words. Those were the coppers who went to pay homage to the president yesterday in his hometown in Katsina. Yeah, they're the ones who got the bags of rice and cows and 1 million naira. But in case you're interested in political stories, you might want to look at it at the bottom here. Fresh crisis brews in Zamfara APC as Yari rejects interim committee. Well, let's leave it there for Daily Trust.
The Daily Times newspaper this morning is talking about presidency PDP bicker over comment on 2023. It would seem like 2023 is just tomorrow, the way it's going. But that's what you have on the front page of the Daily Times newspaper this morning. And the story continues on page 2. That same picture, by the way, Mark, is right there on the front page of the coppers visiting the president in his hometown. And right under the page, that's bottom strip, in green, e-transmission of votes. PDP accuses NCC of lying to Nigerians. What does that mean? Find the story on page 3 of the Daily Times newspaper this morning. That's the Daily Times today.
Well, let's take a look at the Guardian this morning, and you see there, uncertainty trails Igboho's arrest in, well, I want to pronounce that word Cotonou, because that's what my people call it, but Cotonou, yeah. Well, in Cotonou, 20 days after DSS raid. Uncertainty trails Igboho's arrest in Cotonou 20 days after DSS raid. Igboho still in Republic of Benin in handcuffs. Lawyer refutes release rumor. DSS mom 24 hours after arrest at Cotonou Airport. Falano, Ozekome, others react. Call for due process. Arrest is war on Yoruba people, says Adebanjo. Akintoye vows to stop Igboho's extradition to Nigeria. Ohaneze, Yoruba Igbo's consciousness incarcerated while bandits, terrorists roam free. Northern Coalition urges federal government to expose sponsors of Kanu Igboho. So you find all the details on page 2 of the paper. Of course, there's a very long story on it on the front page. And page 2 will give you further details. You have a number of other stories there. U.S. urged to impose visa ban on anti-poll electronic collation senators. Don't criminalize opposing views. NLC cautions federal government. And how federal government plans to boost export with 50 billion naira ESP funding. That's also inside the paper somewhere. And if you look at this health story, something to also worry about or do something about. Cholera claims 30 lives in Jigawa. Let's leave it there for The Guardian.
Well, quite a touching one there, Mark. Take a look at the Nigerian News Direct, and it is also talking about the Igboho controversy. Well, that's actually the word used on the front page. Controversy trails Igboho's arrest. Stories on page 3. Declare amnesty for Igboho. Ladoja tells FG. FG ruthless on Igboho, weak against bandits, others. Find all of the details on page 3 of the paper this morning. And there's this one, 350 debtors owe AMCON 2.05 trillion naira. All the details you'll find on the inside pages. That story about ESP funding is also right there. FG to boost exports with 50 billion naira ESP funding. That's according to the NEPC boss. Stories on page 2. And there's this one, PDP accuses Buhari of self-succession plot. Where is that coming from? Well, find the details on the inside pages of the paper this morning. That's the News Direct this morning.
Take a look at New Telegraph now, and they have this one. Why Sunday Igboho may not be extradited. That's according to his lawyer. How he, German wife, were arrested at Cotonou Airport. Pardon me if they used to Cotonou. Cotonou Airport, that's according to the council. Adebanjo, Akintoye, YCE, others condemn arrest, rally to halt extradition. Ex-presidential aide, Afenifere, Gani Adams should open fundraiser for legal fees. Okay. You might want to see details on pages 2 and 5. You have a number of other stories. Sallah, ACF asks federal government to save Nigerians from bandits, kidnappers. Banditry will soon be a thing of the past. That's according to IBB. Bandits should denounce kidnapping, cattle rustling. That's according to Abdul Salami. And also this one, masses will look to Buhari for guidance in 2023. That's what the presidency is saying. Says PDP nursing false hope. Okay, we'll wait 2 years to see. Page 4 will give you this particular story. COVID-19 Delta variant crashes oil prices below $70. So it would seem that at some point we had some reprieve with oil prices going up, but looks like right now they're on their way down with this COVID-19 Delta variant. Nonetheless, federal government projects $35.77 billion external reserves for 2022. It's a page 17 read. Let's leave it there for New Telegraph.
Yeah, the last one here is Blueprint newspaper this morning. Igboho's arrest. Don't grant extradition order to FG. Council tells Benin Republic. So you see that reflected in some of the other dailies here today. Yoruba leaders working to stop deportation. Ascribed to Akintoye. Declare amnesty for Igboho. You also see that here. Kanu Ladoja tells FG. We're studying the situation at Afenifere. So
well,
there you go.
I don't think that's going anywhere soon, but hey, it has started. Well, that's the much we can take of the papers right now. We'll take a short break, and when we return, it's time to take on the issues for the day. Please stay with us.
Well, I'm sure you've seen a few of the snippets there, but yes, I mean, there was stuff on COVID-19 and also stuff on the Electoral Act, and the Electoral Act continues to loom large. It was the last thing that was considered before the National Assembly went on recess for this holidays. And they've certainly given us something to chew on and, you know, decide whether or not we're happy with in terms of what they've passed, even though in some instances, it's not very clear what one of the chambers did because of the rancor that had, you know, I don't want to say clouded, but for want of a better phrase now, clouded the proceedings on the day that it was supposed to have been passed. Nonetheless, we have two passages now from both the chambers, from the House of Representatives and the Senate. It's causing controversy of some sort, and for some, there are legal implications to what has been passed. For others, they're still dissatisfied, even though they're members of the National Assembly. They're dissatisfied with what has been passed in-house, because don't forget that some people, you know, it's a matter of, it's democracy. It's numbers that eventually carry the day, not because everybody agreed, but because majority had their way. Now, for those who had their say, or, you know, who are dissatisfied, what is going to be the next step for them? We have this morning Mr. Robert Emukwero, who is a senior advocate of Nigeria. He'll be helping us with the legal perspective of things. You're welcome to Sunrise Daily this morning.
Thank you so much for having me.
And we also have Honorable Solomon Bob, who is a member of the subcommittee on INEC. You're welcome to Sunrise Daily as well.
Thank you. It's not like subcommittee on INEC, it's a commission on electoral matters, no subcommittee.
Okay.
But we had a joint House and Senate
joint technical committee,
yeah.
Yes, which you were a part of.
Yeah, of course.
And you know, which was able to reach the report that eventually was submitted to both chambers for passage.
Sure, sure.
And you can confirm to us, Honourable, that indeed what was laid before members on the floor of both chambers, what was passed, agreed upon, I think, for want of it, agreed upon by the Joint Technical Committee. Don't forget that there had been fears that the report was tampered with or could have been tampered with before it was laid. Can you confirm that what was laid to both chambers was what was agreed upon by the Joint Technical Committee?
Yeah, thank you. I think it's a good opportunity now that the whole issue has blown out in public space. So basically put in context what actually happened. It was the Senate that attempted to corrupt its own version of the report. Our report was intact. What we did, the work we did in the Joint House and Senate Committee, the House's version was intact. Nothing was done to insert anything or basically, try to thwart what the committee, Joint Committee, did. It was the Senate that tried to insert that in their own provision. Okay, that was found out, and then I think eventually tried to beat the retreat. But we'll get to the point, of basically trying to understand what really happened. But this is just the context that led to what you're talking about. The House's own report was intact. Nothing was done about it. What we laid was what the committee recommended. And that recommendation was, the efforts of a compromise, because some of us wanted more than that, but there was serious pushback by those who didn't want anything at all to do with transmission electronically in the law. Okay, so we came to a point where we could get a minimalist view, or a position rather, to achieve what we laid on the floor. So what we laid on the floor was what the committee, Joint House and Senate Committee, recommended. For the House, Senate's own version was, as I said, a completely different story. Okay, and their own was, it seemed like a deliberate ploy, to take back everything, and leave the bare bones.
Well, it looks like on the floor of the Senate, I do know that a day before that report was laid, even though it took a while, the Speaker of the House had come out way before that time to say that, look, the report that was given to him has not been tampered with. It's still with the leadership of the House, and, it was safe. It took maybe another week before the Senate President came out to say the same thing about the report that was, also given to the leadership of the Senate. But eventually he did, to say that, nothing, the report had not been tampered with, and it was going to be laid eventually. I think a day before the bill was eventually considered.
Well, the Senate President position was incorrect. I can say that it was incorrect. We were given documents, they tried to pass on documents to us from the Senate, with a view to also incorporating into our reports what the Senate had done. We refused. We had a meeting the day before. I was on one of your sister programs on, I think it was Politics Today, where I maintained that the House's position with respect to the bill we had passed was intact, and that if there was any extraneous material, it couldn't be linked to the House. But it's a different thing altogether what transpired on Thursday and Friday proceeding. Okay, but with respect to the position of both House leadership in terms of what was before them, before they were laid, I think that the House's position reflects exactly what we did. The Senate's own didn't, but it's an attempt later to, basically try to, undo some of the harm that had been done because of the blowback, the public outreach at what had happened.
Mm. Well, eventually the reports were laid before both chambers, and we saw that in the House, in the process of passage, there was plenty of rancor, there was plenty of heat. And even at some point, it was members came to fisticuffs. And it was not successfully passed on Thursday when they thought the House was going to go on recess after the passage. And it had to be moved to Friday. Even at that, we saw members of the PDP stage a walkout as a result of their dissatisfaction with the process. To your mind, I don't know if you can quickly bring us up to speed. I will come to you shortly, Senator. I beg your pardon, Mr. Mukbero. Can you quickly bring us up to speed as to what led to arguments getting so heated? If you say that what you were able to agree upon was a minimalist position that was, it would seem, already well thought out by both chambers, the Senate committee and the House committee, the joint committee, and still it would seem that it was largely unacceptable to many on the floor of both the House and the Senate.
Yeah, it's unfortunate. You see, we're in a system now today, we have lots of, I'm sorry, but it has to be said, reconstructed ideologues for whom democracy is a mere empty abstraction. They don't believe in tenets, in the practice of it. Yes, what we did was, our position was a minimalist one. But even that, was causing rancor among some certain persons, in the legislature. The sequence of events that followed, or rather the trigger to the sequence of events that followed, you saw on Thursday, was an attempt by a member to basically, dissipate order with it. He came with a motion on the floor, that even the minimalist position was not good enough. We should not accept that. He brought a motion to basically say we should have nothing to do with electronic transmission, which is ridiculous. He said we should resort only to manual transmission, manual counting.
Who's that?
Of course, a member of the opposition, of the ruling APC. The motion was promptly defeated. Following that, the second motion was moved to the effect that even what we had with basically vest control and discretion, with INEC, that even that, which I described earlier as, the basic minimalist position, a motion was moved, subsequent to that one moved by the other member I mentioned, that we should, in fact, even make that better by having it expressly stated that result transmission should only be by electronic means. Okay? I'm sure the whole saw what happened. Okay, the void vote was taken. It was against those who were against it. It was in favor of those who were proposing that we should expressly state it in the law that the transmission should be only by electronic means. But we saw also a capricious use of the gavel by the then presiding officer, the chairman of the whole, deputy speaker. He ruled against the A's, even though it was clearly that the A's had won it. The second motion was moved again. That seemed to water that down a bit, but no less expressive about what should be in the law. Okay, the A's again had it. He ruled against the A's again. Such an extraordinary and capricious use of the gavel. So this was...
Why wasn't a division called for?
Well, a motion for division was called. He ignored it. He ignored it. Like I said, it was an extraordinary use of abuse, basically, of your position as presiding officer. By our rule, when there's a disagreement between, A's and A's, okay, when it's called, you have to, you have to divide the house. But they refused. In fact, totally ignored it. Next day, denied that there was no such motion at all. But everybody knew. So it was these were the events that led to the pandemic you saw in the house and the disagreements, and yeah, a lot of things were said. It was heated up. Members nearly came to a position of, like you described as physical. Yeah, it actually happened. But it was the audacity, the daring, unlawfulness of the action taken by the man presiding, and the near absence of decorum on the part of those who didn't want anything at all to do with transmission on the floor. Like I said, it's unfortunate. It's very sad.
So eventually what was passed, and we'll come to what was passed in the Senate, what was passed in the House? Yes, I know that the PDP, the minority caucus in the House, staged a walkout the following day when it would seem that certain things had not gone their way or they did not agree with the process. Honorable Ndudi Lumelu stated the position of the minority members as to why they walked out, staged their protest. But I'm sure that you must have heard what eventually was passed on the floor of the House. What was passed?
Well, what was passed, what was purported to have been passed was what we laid. I have no information that anything else was done to Section 52, the vexatious Section 52, subsection 2. What was passed was what we laid. Like I said, it wasn't so much, a matter of, what was before the House. It was a brazen attempt, first, to switch that completely 360 degrees and bring something else that was completely at variance with what the people wanted. Okay?
So the House did eventually pass that electronic transmission was allowed. I mean, that INEC could transmit results electronically.
Yeah, that's the House's version, yeah. Like I said, it vests sole authority on what to do, on INEC, or rather with INEC. Yeah, that's what was passed. That's the information I have now. Like you said properly, we at some point we had to leave because that atmosphere had become, very disagreeable, and some of us felt that, what was going on there was a charade, and the chicanery abused all by those, who wanted something different from what Nigerians, actually demand, was something we couldn't live with. So we had to leave, and they made our position known to the whole world. Yeah.
Well, I don't know if the story, provides a very good background, but I thought it was important that our viewers understood, what transpired, at least in the House, because it was seen that there was some confusion. There was very little clarity at the end of the day when the House went on recess as to what exactly had transpired on the floor because of some of the events that had overshadowed, it would seem, what eventually was passed on the floor of the House. But the Senate zone was pretty clear. What happened on Thursday when a division, when they couldn't agree, or when it would seem that the ayes, they were not clear who was getting the voice vote. The senators decided to go for a division, and that, set things pretty straight. The section 52, which would seem the most vexatious section in the entire amendment of the Electoral Act, was passed with some amendments, extra amendments, it would seem, not as submitted by the joint committees of the House and the Senate. And we saw that the Senate has said that INEC can transmit electronically with the permission of NCC and also the approval of the National Assembly, and that has caused a bit of controversy. I don't know if you want to quickly wade in on that before we go to other parts which you think will be able to make significant difference to the Electoral Act as currently is, as currently passed by both chambers of the National Assembly.
Thank you very much for that opportunity to give some of my thoughts on this issue. I think, firstly, what I want to highlight is that the reports of the Joint Technical Committee of the National Assembly, comprising the Senate and the House of Representatives, is a recommendation to the Senate and, of course, to the House of Representatives. It is not as if the Senate or the House of Representatives do not reserve the right to revise that recommendation. It's not as if it's binding on them, because it is the Senate as a body that will pass that recommendation or amend it as it so pleases. That is within their constitutional remit. It's not the committee, either a joint committee or a single committee, that has legislative powers. It is the Senate working in conjunction with the House that is reposed with that constitutional power to pass this law. So I really do not think that what the Senate did in changing what was presented to them on the floor of the House is outside the provisions of the Constitution. It's very much within it. They can do that. They can revise any provision. They can reject it entirely, provided a vote is taken on it. I suspect this is precisely what happened, that Section 52 was revised, and it wasn't in tandem with what was presented. I don't see anything wrong with that per se, legally speaking. And what scenario has now been thrown up really is that there is a Senate version that is not in harmony with the House version, which automatically means there has to be a reconciliation so that we have a harmonized version that both houses can pass as law. You know, I think that is where we are now. Now, the other legal issue that I think this throws up really is the section proposed really either by the Senate or by the House of Representatives. I see it as being something to regulate the powers of INEC. Because each is more or less saying, INEC, you will transmit results from of the election electronically, whilst that of the House, from what we have just heard now, gives the discretion solely to INEC to do that. And that of the Senate appears to place some caveats on it, namely the NCC's intervention and that of the National Assembly. I think, properly speaking, within the context of the Constitution, we really need to look at what are the powers of INEC. The powers of INEC are constitutional powers, particularly when you look at paragraph 15 of the 3rd schedule. It says the Independent National Electoral Commission shall have the following powers: to organize, undertake, and supervise elections. So for me, the real question is, when the National Assembly is trying to regulate how INEC organizes, undertakes, and supervises election, is it not more or less encroaching into the constitutional powers of INEC? The Constitution has given INEC the power to organize the election, to undertake it, to supervise it, and conduct it subject to its directions. So that really throws up a very serious, to my mind, constitutional question. If these provisions, either that of the Senate or the House, is passed, can it be said not to be an infraction into the constitutional powers of INEC? Because I honestly believe that the reason why the Constitution has given INEC directly the power to organize, undertake, and supervise all elections to the offices in the Constitution is to give it a form of independence and insulate it completely from any kind of interference. Because an act of the National Assembly that seeks to curtail or interfere with the power given by the Constitution, generally speaking, is held to be null and void. So that is the perspective with which I think both houses need to look at these provisions.
So we do know that, I mean, yes, indeed, the Constitution does give INEC, pretty wide powers with regards to the conduct of elections. And the Electoral Act is supposed to provide, even in further detail, how these powers will be exercised with regards to conduct of the election. Now, you have also said that that is an attempt to regulate the powers of INEC. Yes. Is that how you're seeing the body of the Electoral Act, or the attempt at this particular amendment?
Well, I think to answer that question, we need to look at paragraph 15I that gives the National Assembly powers to provide for other functions that INEC may perform. So when you look at paragraph 15 of the third schedule, part 1, it talks of the powers of INEC to conduct election, register political parties, and then the last subparagraph says, and such other functions as may be conferred on it by the National Assembly. That phrase, other functions, to my personal thinking, it excludes those that have been specifically mentioned. It means the National Assembly itself should not venture into those areas that the Constitution has covered, namely organize, undertake, and supervise. You can't pass any law on it. It's possible to maintain that position that any law you pass that tries to regulate how INEC organizes, undertakes, or supervises an election is likely to be a law that is curtailing, interfering with these very broad powers that the Constitution has given to INEC. And you know, this scenario has played out before. In 2001 Electoral Act, where the National Assembly made some provisions to the Electoral Act, adding to the Constitution itself in respect of matters already covered by the Constitution. And the Supreme Court consistently struck down those provisions. That once the Constitution has covered an area, the National Assembly cannot enact any law on it, because it means that the Constitution has covered the field. So for me, the critical question in my mind is, the phrase organize, undertake, and supervise. What does it mean exactly? Because once the court defines the ambit of this to include that, look, this means INEC is given unhindered power to organize this election, whatever way you want to define the word organize, to undertake it, to supervise it. Certainly it means that any other law that now seeks to show how we are going to organize it, how we are going to supervise it, it means we are trying to put some fetters on that power.
So to your mind, would you say that there has been much ado about nothing, especially with this electronic transmission and no electronic transmission, electronic voting, no electronic... It's been a big battle that, you know, had been on way before now. We saw it in the 2015 elections, even when INEC wanted to introduce card readers. Any form of anything electronic, so far so good, has been met with pretty stiff resistance, and there have been attempts to, as you said, regulate it in the Electoral Act. I want you to, you know, shed light on why there has been much ado about electronic, adding electronic anything to the Electoral Act, and whether or not there should have been in the very first instance. But I'll let you do that when we come back from this break. Please stay with us. Mr. Robert Emekwero, who is a senior advocate of Nigeria, and Honorable Solomon Bob, who is a member of the INEC committee in the House of Representatives, are our guests this morning. And we're talking about what you just saw there, attempts to make amendments on the Electoral Act, and, you know, how matters eventually, you know, transpired. Just before we went on break, you had told us that as Mr. Emekwero had told us, that, you know, INEC had pretty wide powers given to it by the Constitution, and almost every attempt we have seen have been attempts to regulate the powers given to INEC as stipulated in the Constitution. Is that correct? Yes, that's correct. Now, as I was just asking before we went on break, the big question is, what then is the much ado about the introduction of electronic transmission or electronic voting? What's the big deal?
Well, I think what appears to be at the back, or what is fueling this whole controversy, is really two things. The first one is item 22 on the exclusive legislative list that confers power on the National Assembly to make laws with regard to election to the offices of the President, Vice President, and all other offices under the Constitution. So by item 22 of the exclusive, on the exclusive legislative list, the National Assembly is given powers to pass laws for election. Now, that is on the one hand. Then, on the other hand, there are decisions of the Supreme Court, basically, because you did mention the card reader. And the reaction of the Supreme Court to the introduction of the card readers, I think 2011 election, yes, during the 2011 election and subsequent elections, that since the card reader itself was not contained in the Electoral Act, it couldn't be a basis to challenge the conduct of any election, implicitly suggesting that unless the National Assembly enacts a law with regards to the conduct of the election, then you cannot really rely on guidelines of INEC issued to organize, undertake, and supervise the conduct of the election. But in all those series of cases that the Supreme Court had the opportunity to hear and determine.
It was post-2015, I believe.
Yeah, maybe 2015, very likely 2015, yes. The issue of whether or not these legislations interfered with the very broad powers given to INEC did not arise in those cases. But that, or those cases, those decisions, those judgments of the Supreme Court became like an endorsement of the power of the National Assembly to make law with regard to technology in the conduct of election. Because this is basically what is happening. INEC has the power to conduct election. I don't think there's anybody arguing with INEC about that. But it is now the deployment of technology to conduct the election. That appears to be where the whole controversy is raging, to deploy technology. Now, do you need legislation to back that up for the deployment of technology to do what you are constitutionally empowered to do? Personally, I don't think so. But the Supreme Court has already given the indication that an act of the National Assembly will be necessary for that. But like I said, those judgments of the Supreme Court, the issue was not agitated whether or not that will not be an infraction of the powers given to INEC itself. So for me, I feel that is a moot point. But the way things are, I'm just basically giving you the background to why this is still a controversy, because it hasn't been settled by the court. What has even been done is to give the indication that, yes, you need a law of the National Assembly to enable INEC to deploy technology to conduct the election. I don't think it's desirable that INEC should be able to adopt any technological means to perform any of its functions. There are so many functions INEC is conducting right now in terms of the election that they have deployed technology. They didn't need any act of the National Assembly to do that. And I don't think it should be made a condition. Otherwise, it means every time there is a technology or an advancement in technology that will aid the conduct of elections, i.e. aid it in the sense of making it more transparent, more credible, more accountable. I mean, that is the key in any electoral process. It must be accountable. You must have a means to verify whatever result is returned by INEC. If we cannot achieve that, then there's a big problem. So which means if a technology, for example, is developed today that will ensure accountability in the process, you have to go back to the National Assembly to say, well, you need to enact this so that we can do it. I see it as not being very, very desirable, really.
Well, let's flip this to Lagos now. I know that my colleagues have questions for you, gentlemen.
Yeah, Mr. Mukwero, I mean, listening to what you have said now and given how INEC has conducted elections previously, sometimes they've transmitted some results electronically, as they have said. Is it going to be risky if INEC then says, well, the positions or all the drama in the National Assembly notwithstanding, we will transmit these results electronically. So if someone goes to court, if INEC, all this is, in that realm, if INEC does that and someone goes to court, will there be chances that it may be jeopardized given what you cited about the Supreme Court's decision with regard to the card reader?
I think, of course, there is a serious jeopardy that will arise if that was done. Because, like I said, the indication from the Supreme Court right now is that there has to be a law from the National Assembly to back the deployment of technology in the conduct of the elections. So, if INEC were to go ahead to adopt transmission of results of the election without a provision in the National Assembly, without a provision in the Electoral Act empowering it to so do, then it means that transmission of the results is open to challenge, and there are authorities indicating that the challenge may be upheld. And of course, like I said earlier, the specific issue of whether or not the act of the National Assembly that seeks to regulate how INEC conducts election does not fall within the remit of an area that the Constitution itself has exhaustively covered, to the extent that it precludes any other subordinate legislation from playing in that field at all. That hasn't been resolved by the Supreme Court.
But is that still going to be a challenge, given the fact that the results, the voting would have already been concluded manually, and then they have a manual copy of the results? So if they transmit it within, if they transmit that electronically from one of the allocations to the other for the purposes of collation. So if anyone still goes to court based on that, how easy or difficult do you think it would be to prove their case, given the fact that they still have records, manual records of those results that have been transmitted?
I think to answer your question, there's always generally a provision in the electoral laws historically in Nigeria that more or less gives a blanket protection to whatever INEC does that is not in compliance with the provisions of the Electoral Act. It usually goes that, non-compliance with the provisions of the Electoral Act shall not invalidate the conduct of the election unless you are able to demonstrate that that non-compliance has substantially affected the outcome of the election. It's in the current provision, it's in the previous provision. So it's not just enough for any person to show that there has been non-compliance with the provisions of the Electoral Act. You must go further to show that that non-compliance has substantially affected the outcome of the election. So even if the provision either as proposed by the Senate or as proposed by the House is ultimately what is adopted, there is always that provision there that you need to show that the non-compliance has substantially affected the outcome of the election.
It would seem
it's not every irregularity by way of non-compliance that can lead to the invalidation of an election. For election petitioners, the burden on them to establish that an election was null or void or riddled with corrupt practice is a very, very enormous responsibility. And as a matter of policy, I suspect, the courts are loath to just upturn an election. When you just go and say, well, the act says this and they haven't done it. That's never been a basis for the invalidation of any election.
Well, it would seem like, just as you said earlier, there is a need to unpack those three words: organize, undertake, and supervise. And sincerely, I haven't quite decrypted the word organize, because I'm thinking if I'm supposed to organize an event, the what to do has been given to me, then the process of how I do it is supposed to be my discretion, at least from what we have on the pages of the Constitution, Section 15 sub A, as you have described to us. So, in terms of that word organize, undertake, and supervise, do you think there is anywhere in the interpretation that we can find electronic transmission, given the way things are in the world today? I'm asking because I don't know if there is anywhere in the CBN Act or Bofia Act that says that the banks shall use technology to conduct their business.
Well, I think that's the point I made earlier, that there is, strictly speaking, no need to legislate for the use of technology in the exercise of powers that are given to you. But where things stand now with judgment of the Supreme Court, as I said, in relation to the card readers, is that there has to be such a provision. It's not as if the use of or the transmission of, let me not use the word transmission of results, let me just use deployment of technology, because that really is what is the issue, deploying technology, either to transmit results, either to conduct election, either to do just about anything. It's really deploying technology. That is really what is at the heart of this whole controversy. So it's just the broad language used or deployed in the Constitution. Organize means you have the discretion on how you are going to organize it, undertake and supervise. It really basically gives you a form of independence to conduct that election. But I keep on emphasizing, the trend of the decision of the Supreme Court is that there must be a provision in the Electoral Act that will enable INEC to deploy technology, either card reader or any other form of technology to conduct the election. That is why I believe in this current proposal of the Electoral Act. The card reader has now been incorporated as part and parcel of the process of ensuring that the election is free, fair, transparent, and accountable. Because from the card reader itself right now in the present proposal, it's been made the basis of determining whether or not an election will be invalidated in any polling unit. Where the results exceed what is contained in the card reader, the election is proposed to be declared null and void.
Now, given what we have had over the years, where voter apathy continues to taper down on a scary level, and given the controversies that have surrounded this particular proposition of the members of the National Assembly before, even now at this stage, even before the concurrence by the two chambers, what would you suggest to the members of the National Assembly in this regard? Because there are those who say that it's because we haven't adequately deployed technology that we haven't been able to have the kind of election that you described the other time, credible elections. And if people feel their votes are not going to count, they're just going to, sit back at home and all of that. And that's why, as we say, we are where we are now. So what would you suggest to the members of the National Assembly as they go for this concurrence meeting in order to be able to make the process credible so that more and more people can come out to vote?
No, thank you very much for that. It's a very important question. I will honestly suggest that the National Assembly should look particularly at that paragraph 15 of the Electoral Act and try to empower INEC more to be able to operate in such a way that it can deploy whatever technology will assure and ensure a free, fair, and credible election. Because like you rightly observed, if the people perceive, rightly or wrongly, that the election is likely not going to be credible or transparent, that is a serious incentive for people to come out to vote. So I honestly believe that the National Assembly should look, during the course of this harmonization, they need to look to work very closely with INEC, as they have done, frankly, during the process of even getting up this Electoral Act. INEC officers were part and parcel of the technical committee that brought up this thing. And like you observed, take into consideration other matters in terms of voter apathy. Anything that will encourage voter apathy should be discouraged. So I think that in keeping with the spirit of the Constitution itself, that gives very, very broad powers to INEC, I think that broadness should be maintained, so that INEC should be enabled to deploy whatever technology that comes up at any time that will ensure that elections are free and fair.
Ask Honorable Bob, you know, the rationale behind that walkout that was staged by the opposing members, you know, beginning to raise more questions. There's also thought, having walked out, it just paved the way for the other members to go ahead and smoothly approve all the processes that they wanted. So many thought, members should have stayed in there, make your point to the end, or filibuster the process.
Well, thank you. Before I respond to that, let me just weigh in on the few things Mr. Mokwaru has said. The House's position, what the House passed, even in our absence, which I've made reference to here already, is consistent with the test schedule, paragraph 15 of the Constitution. It gives INEC unfettered powers to, you know, deploy whatever method it chooses. That's consistent with, you know, the words using that paragraph 15, organize, undertake, and supervise. So if any of the two chambers has done anything to withdraw INEC's powers, it is the Senate's version. The House's version completely, maintains the integrity of the process, by in no way seeking to hamper or prohibit or in any sense undermine the capacity of INEC to do as it pleases with respect to the method it chooses organizing elections, okay, or deploying resource transmission. That's one. Now, to the other point about having to leave, yeah, it's an acceptable, parliamentary practice when there is a behavior that is inconsistent, with the procedure of your rules. It's all over the world. It's an acceptable practice to work out the way we did. That said, let me also quickly add that some of us will have the view that we could have taken a second thought about moving out at all, and maybe stalled proceeding the second time we did the previous day. Yeah, but but all that now it's neither here nor there, because as I indicated in my opening remarks, what the House passed, respect to Electoral Act in our absence, on the vexatious or the vexed, the vexed section 52.2 is essentially what the committee in which I served submitted. Okay, so there is nothing that was done with respect to that provision that is not consistent with what the committee in which I served did. Okay, that's what I'll say about that. But to the broader question of INEC's powers being capacious enough to undertake election in any mode decides, I've always said that. Yeah, I agree. But I think a lot of the blame only lies in Mr. Emekwaru's own submission here. The judiciary is responsible for muddying the waters. The judiciary is responsible for muddying the waters. But the one who came up with all sorts of funny judgments, questioning INEC's capacity, to issue guidelines and conduct elections in the way they thought best. Yes, their powers are enormous. They are broad enough to accommodate any of the ways and means they think best to conduct elections. But the judiciary has been, pushing back against INEC, using those powers to actually do what it thinks is best. It's the reaction. The action of the legislature is a reaction to those judgments we've seen from the judiciary.
So how do you think, I mean, as we wrap up now, how do you think that both chambers are going to reconcile? Because we know that they have to present a harmonious copy. They have to harmonize and then eventually give a copy to the executive for the president to sign. There are those who are saying if the version that is presented to the president is what the Senate passes, that the president should decline assent if he really wants to, give a legacy to Nigerians. But there is a big hurdle, it would seem, to cross before we get to that point.
Yeah, thank you. That's a useful point to make. You see, everybody seems to think that whatever is done in National Assembly is done and dusted, I should say. But that's not true. However, this is a process. We are only at the beginning, okay, of a two-part process. Nothing gives me any confidence that if we passed anything, that doesn't sit well with the other arm of this government, the executive, that it will be signed. So at the end of the day, we are more like this a will-o'-the-wisp, just chasing, maybe chasing shadows. Nothing gives me, there is no genuine intention, okay, to undertake serious electoral reforms.
But before we get there,
yes,
before we get to the part where the president signs,
yes,
how do you see both chambers, get into a harmonized version? Well,
we'll get to that bridge. We'll cross the bridge and get there. When we get to the conference, every member of the conference committee has one vote. So it will come to a point where, just like we saw in the other act that is now a matter of hot public debate, we'll see how. But my guess is that the Senate will be mindful of the powers donated to INEC under the Constitution and pull back from the dangerous part they are working, which is an attempt to basically circumscribe the operating environment for INEC. So my hope is that they would, at the very minimum, accede with the House's own version.
Are you optimistic about that as well?
Well, I personally would prefer that at least they harmonize this bill in such a way that it doesn't constrain the powers of INEC to conduct the elections. That really is what I think is the most desirable thing.
Do you think it will happen?
I hope so. I honestly speaking don't know, but I think when attention is drawn, as I believe we are trying to do, to the wide powers of INEC and the undesirability of always insisting that before INEC deploys technology, there has to be an amendment to the Act. It's really not very desirable, really. When you look at it in the long run, INEC should be able to embrace whatever technology is existing at any particular time, provided it will ensure that these elections are credibly conducted, transparently, and people can verify it. This is the biggest problem in Nigerian election. They are not open to accounting.
And I think that's what a lot of Nigerians desire. Free, fair, credible, and you've added accountable elections.
You can trace how these results are arrived at.
We're totally out of time, gentlemen. I wish we could go on for a bit more, but we're totally out of time. I have to thank you both for coming on Sunrise Daily this morning. Mr. Robert Temukwero is a senior advocate of Nigeria, and Honorable Solomon Bob is a member of the INEC committee in the House of Representatives. We'll take a break now. When we come back, we'll have another issue for you, so please don't go away.
All right, welcome back. Well, yes, Professor Christian Happy joins us next. He is the Director, African Center of Excellence for Genomics of Infectious Diseases of the Redeemers University. So he's a genomic expert. Good morning, Prof. Thank you for joining us today on the program. Well, given the,
Thank you.
information.
Thank you for having me.
All right, given how the rate of local infectious rate raises a huge concern about this variant of concern, could you give us a picture? What exactly are we dealing with here?
Yeah, we definitely are dealing with another beast, which is very different from what we've experienced in the first and second wave. The virus, the Delta virus, that is responsible for the third wave that you've seen across Africa and the world, is more deadlier than the ones that we experienced before. You can see the situation in many African countries. South Africa is almost 2,000% up. Rwanda is almost 1,700% up in number of cases, and there's a total lockdown there until July 27. We experience these huge surges in Liberia, in Sierra Leone, and then in Uganda. Many countries in Africa are locking down because of this surge. Within 2 weeks, it's very possible that you can see this variant taking over from what has been existing. So we have to be very careful. We're dealing with the dangerous beast at this point in time. In Europe, in America, we can see, the number of cases surging. Countries are going back toward lockdown. So we really have to be very careful because we don't have the resources to deal with a beast like the Delta variant.
So those countries not too far away from us in the West African coast, why do you think we haven't been hit by that kind of wave here in the country?
Well, if care is not taken, and if we do not adhere to social distancing, wearing our mask, and then adhering to all of the public and safety rules given by NCDC and the Ministries of Health, if we do not do that, then we are in for trouble. So it's very important that people take this seriously, because in countries where this is happening, they went through the phase that we went through now, whereby they thought that, oh no, nothing's going to happen to us, and then suddenly they found themselves in that situation. I can tell you authoritatively that the last set of samples from Rwanda that was sent to my lab at SG, Redeemers University, 93% of those samples were all Delta variant. It tells you how terrible this situation is. The hospitals in Rwanda are overwhelmed. Oxygen is becoming a problem. A country as sophisticated as Rwanda is facing a challenge. You can imagine what will happen to other African countries that are not at that level of sophistication yet.
But that's clearly a challenge. But perhaps one of the things, Prof, that one may want to consider now is maybe even in the communication of this whole, matter, from the very, very beginning, how well do you think, from the authorities to the people and the various levels of dissemination of information, would you say that that communication ambit has been taken, on board to the people? Do you think it's been efficient?
I think the communication from government and then other stakeholders have been efficient, but it has not been aggressive enough. And I think we need to go back. We have to be very consistent. I listened to the reporting from your staff in Lagos, and you can imagine the mindset of people, where people think that COVID is for the old, COVID is for the rich, COVID is not for them. But I can tell you, and then authoritatively, from the data that we have, being a member of the Africa Union Task Force for COVID-19 in Africa, the disease is hitting much more younger population than it has happened before. The younger people are getting more infected with the Delta variant than it has happened before. So clearly, the young have to be very careful. They have to believe. If there is a way, they let them get vaccinated, because that helps in a way. We've seen clearly that, people that have been vaccinated before seem to be more protected than those that have not been. And vaccine, it really protect people. But now, in the absence of vaccination, we have no other choice but to go back and apply the non-pharmaceutical measures. Wearing our mask constantly, making sure that we observe hand washing hygiene, making sure that we also, respect social distancing. I know it is not easy, but I think, it is not just the responsibility of the federal government. It is our collective responsibility. Each and every one of us should take this seriously, because we are not just protecting ourselves, but we are protecting our neighbors, we are protecting our communities, and eventually we'll protect this country. So let's take it as our own responsibility to ensure that we prevent the spread of this disease, and especially of this deadly variant, so that together we can get out of this quagmire as soon as possible. If everybody is responsible and take this responsibility serious, we can all beat COVID-19 and get back to normalcy as soon as possible.
Well, just to be clear, Prof, how different are the symptoms of this Delta variant compared to the first one or two strains that we've had?
The symptoms may appear to be similar, but the reality is that you get overwhelmed with the virus that is more invasive. That is, the transmission rate of this virus is just about 70 times faster, than the previous one. So which means that your cells get overwhelmed. Everything that has to do with your respiratory system and everything about your body get overwhelmed. And as such, you present much more sicker. And that's the reason why you are seeing people having, their respiratory, their respiratory distress. They find themselves very sick, very ill. The symptoms are more or less the same. People would think that, at some point, they don't present symptoms, but when it stopped, it actually moves much more faster because your body gets overwhelmed in such a short time. And that's the reason why you are seeing people when they present with the Delta variant, in little or no time, they are gone. Because, when it starts manifesting, it's so overwhelming that your body does not really have an adequate time to start responding. And then people should remember that there's really presently, we can say that there is a real treatment for COVID, and then vaccines is only the way forward. And then if we have such a situation with the shortage of vaccine that we have in the country, then we need to take non-pharmaceutical means of protection very seriously. Let's wear our mask. Let's make sure that we wash our hands. Let's make sure that we don't attend public gathering and that we don't gather. Let's ensure that we can practice hand hygiene or proper hygiene. Let's ensure also that we respect all of the safety rules given by government.
Well, Prof, this is actually raises a lot more concern, given those graphic description that how you painted it. But we also found that there was this recent study from China, which presumably found that, it did say that people who were presumably unvaccinated and infected with the Delta variant had a viral load within their respiratory system that they said it was 1,000 times higher than the amount of virus that was present among people who had been infected by the original strain of the virus. So these non-pharmaceutical measures, are they really going to be that effective, at least given the rate at which this virus spreads?
Yes, it is obvious that the non-pharmaceutical measures are very effective. We've seen countries like, some countries in the past, like Singapore and other countries that actually beat this virus or the first wave just using non-pharmaceutical. It is clear, as you get from the China study, that if you got vaccinated, you are better protected than somebody that wasn't vaccinated. But I think in the absence of vaccine, studies have proven that if we apply non-pharmaceuticals, if we go on and then use a mask and wash our hands and then avoid use social distancing, physical distancing, and avoid unnecessary gathering, we can actually bring down the viral biomass in the environment, at a very, very low level. So really, I think it is all about respecting this. You can see that in countries that have relaxed and then we have gone on and then say, oh, well, we're out of the wood. The beast came back, with revenge. So we have to be very careful. We have to respect this. I know it's not easy, but I think that as much as we can all do this and respect, all the safety guidelines and respect, and then ensure that we don't spread the virus, or we respect, one another by wearing our mask, we are going to have the situation. We do not have to go through a third wave. If we apply all these measures, we can actually beat this virus. We can do without going through a third wave. But if we do not, if we keep believing that this is hoax and everything, then at least we are going to unnecessarily lose people in our communities that we shouldn't have. I think it is our individual responsibility. It is our collective responsibility. It is not just the responsibility of the government. I think, the government starts with us, and I think we need to take responsibility.
What kind of study is going on here in the country about this virus and those who have been infected in terms of what has been found? How do we adapt, or move forward?
Well, you can see that, we have been on top of the situation, somewhat, simply because the variant was actually discovered pretty early, and then we found more. We know exactly where they are. But then the more reason why we have to be very careful, because surveillance requires, routine sampling and constant sampling, and the results are shared with the Nigeria Center for Disease Control. So the policies that you see from the Nigeria Center for Disease Control and then the Presidential Steering Committee are based on data. So the data, what makes Nigeria a bit unique and different from the rest of the world, many countries in Africa, is the fact that the policies in Nigeria are guided by a lot of data, by a lot of evidence, and that really makes the country a bit unique. But then that said, as they are setting the policies and then they are telling people to continue to wear their mask and then do the right thing, we should continue, to respect those, and we should continue to listen to what the public health authorities are saying, because that is the only way out.
Data, Prof, there are questions that a number of people have asked around the efficacy of the vaccines against this particular strain of the virus. There are those who have argued that the vaccine was just for the first strain, and this Delta variant, is said to be far more virulent than the previous one. So one wonders, is it still going to be as effective against this, strain, or are we to wait for another?
The reality is that, yes, the vaccine was designed against the first strain, but also remember that this variant has a lot of similarity with the first strain. There are just some areas that, along the S gene, or what they call the spike gene, that has mutated. And then that could give, somewhat the possibility to the virus to escape the vaccine. But again, I want to stress the fact that, it's not always the case. Once you have been vaccinated, it means that your immune system has been boosted. And then you've been given an opportunity, to recognize the virus and then to fight it. What I'm saying here clearly is that the vaccine will protect a lot. If you look at numbers across the world, look at numbers in the US, for instance, that have covered millions of doses of vaccine. The number of people that have had vaccine breakthrough are just barely 10,000 out of millions. Then you can imagine. So that proportion is very insignificant. It's less than 1%, or less than 0.1%. So that is very insignificant. So if you wanted to do those type of comparison, then you can see that vaccine protect. But then this said, it is also said clearly, and then we have shown that data prove that even if you are vaccinated, continue to respect, wear your mask, continue to respect your social distancing. That actually makes it more better. So I think, being vaccinated does not mean that you are 100% and absolutely immune. But then being vaccinated means that, even when you have breakthrough infection, with this variant, the disease manifestation in people that have been vaccinated is much more, less than people that have not been vaccinated, which means that the vaccine still help you a lot, to overcome.
So, Prof, what kind of symptoms or what circumstances may play out if one is vaccinated the first time, waiting for the second dose, and contracts this Delta variant, compared to perhaps if they've been vaccinated twice and still contract the virus?
Well, it's clear that, when you receive one dose of the vaccine, then you need a second dose. That's what we call that boosting dose, to actually boost your immune system. So when you receive only one dose, it means that your immune system has been exposed. But then the level of response that you can exhibit compared to someone that has received the two doses, is much more lower. That's why you need a boosting dose. That's why we call this vaccine a prime boost, vaccine. But now, if you are exposed, to the virus after you receive the third dose, it is obvious that, yes, you might, again, I put it in case you might get sick. But then if you want to compare, the probability of somebody that has been vaccinated, and somebody that has not been vaccinated and both exposed to this virus, the probability that the person that has not been vaccinated gets sick is much more higher than the person that has not been vaccinated. So which means that, again, even though you receive the first dose, the only way, I think the best way to prevent exposure and then getting exposed or necessarily exposed to this variant is to continue to the same non-pharmaceutical ways of protection that we've done before. Wearing your mask, ensuring that we respect social distancing, ensuring that we respect hand hygiene and everything, ensuring that we don't just go to unnecessary gatherings. So those are very, very effective and helpful ways to augment the protection that the vaccine is already giving you, be it 1 dose or even 2 doses.
So, Prof, does this COVID lab leak hypothesis affect anything in terms of research? What do you think about it?
Well, I think I can say categorically that there are just many, what I call many people out there that do understand nothing about science, that have turned, to be scientists in social media. I mean, it is obvious, this, I am more than convinced, and I do the genetic of this, we sequence these viruses routinely, that this is not a lab leak. I am very convinced about that, because if there was, we would have found it. Because we're not just looking at the virus or the way people are looking at it. We're scrutinizing this virus. We're looking at it, element by element, and then we'll have the whole complete map in front of us. If there was anywhere that a gene was glued or something was integrated, we would have found it. It's more of a natural occurrence than a lab leak. That is just, and I don't believe too much in people talking about lab leaks, because they are just there are many naive people out there, or people that don't understand nothing about science today, that are suddenly turned to be gurus, by just social media. And I think, you need to listen to the scientists. You need to follow the science, and not people, that are really don't understand too much about science, but are actually peddling false, theories or conspiracy theories out there.
So did you, whilst you researched and studied all of these processes, were you surprised that this Delta variant eventually hit?
I wasn't surprised. And then, I wasn't surprised. And then this might not, I say, mark my word, might not be even the last variant that we'll see. Viruses are meant to change. Viruses are meant to mutate. They are under so much pressure that because they are RNA viruses, then they are subjected to mutation. But if the mutation occurs in a place that is affecting, and that gives the virus the propensity to infect people more, or to become more evasive of your immune system, then we end up in this situation. So I am not surprised. And then I can also say that, as long as transmission continues, and that's what we're talking about, people avoiding to spread the virus by taking all of the necessary measures or getting vaccinated. As long as transmission continues, regardless of wherever we're in the world, the probability that we have new variant that could be more vulnerable and more damaging to even the present vaccine is there. So, and that's the reason why we say, let's make sure that we take responsibility to prevent transmission to continue. Because as long as there is transmission, the virus will keep changing. And it's very possible that at some point the virus can change for the worse. So we are all responsible to prevent this pandemic from continuing.
Well, in terms of all of our responsibility, I just want to ask this as we wind down on this topic, Prof. There's still that challenge, and it's a question we ask every health professional. There's the challenge of the balance between lives and livelihood, health and economy, the personal economy of people, especially in a climate like ours. That is a critical challenge for all the authorities, including all of us who are supposed to take responsibility. What would be your counsel?
Well, I think, as you mentioned, it's very difficult for our own economies and then for us in Africa, because, there is that balance that you need to create between life and livelihood. How do you do it? And I think that it's very difficult for people to, to say, okay, we'll continue to get locked indoor. We'll continue to, to do the things that we've not been doing before. But I think that there's a way to balance it. I think the government, both at federal and state and then local level, should come up with a way of getting people to make their livelihood while protecting lives. And that way could be, for instance, to balance. Maybe you may just decide to open, have some people open certain days while others are opening certain days. Try to get people into stores by numbers. We're not saying that everywhere has to be locked down. You can decide to have maybe 100 people in a supermarket or in a mall at a time. And then, there are ways where this could be balanced. It's going to be a little bit challenging, but at the same time, we can actually balance both. I think it's about setting the right policy and striking the right balance so that people can protect both life and their livelihood.
Right, Professor Christian Happy, we do appreciate your perspectives this morning. Prof is the Director, African Center of Excellence for Genomics of Infectious Diseases, the Redeemers University. Prof, we do thank you for coming on today.
Thank you for having me.
Well, most certainly is a challenge. I mean, there is no taking it away. No, that challenge is still going to be there. Look, everyone can do all the talking that we need to do. You know, take on the challenges that we need to take, give all the counsel that we need to give. But at the end of the day, every individual has the task of taking responsibility, you know, because unless we take responsibility, as government has been, you know, admonishing, exactly where we're going from here. I mean, someone, you know, earlier in the day still talked about the fact that while the Eid celebrations were going on and all, guess what? The prayers, most of the prayer grounds, the festivities, and everyone, most of the people were not wearing masks. So I'm just wondering how one is really expected to take that on board, given that, I mean, it just doesn't seem to be getting any better. Things don't seem to be easing out on people. The challenges are right there in our faces. How do we confront this if we do not take responsibility? It's also cheering to know that, you know, government and everyone is saying, look, there are things that we need to do, and we all need to do what we need to do. But hey, the challenge is not going to go away unless we do what we need to do. A few of your messages have come in. Oshino Kingsley is talking about the same thing, about the COVID-19 and the Delta variant. We all need to be responsible for our safety and do the needful. The virus is real. Our health system and economy can't afford an outbreak or another lockdown. That's Oshino Kingsley's message, and pretty much speaking to the same issue.
Well, do we have Demola Lalade?
Oh,
okay,
yes,
well, he says, well, the Delta variant is more dangerous than the first strain, so Nigerians should continue to maintain all protocols set out by WHO and the Center for Disease Control. It is better to be safe than to be sorry. The COVID strains have come to stay, so we all have to live with it and deal with it appropriately. Don't be surprised that after the Delta variant, we might soon have another variant. Do you see what he wrote here? He's being cheeky. He said, it may be your variant. Oh, dear.
Well, Adoga Joseph is talking about the Electoral Act in National Assembly, and he says, why can't NAS conduct a vote that is devoid of rancor? Why do they have to conduct a voice vote on an issue as sensitive as an Electoral Act amendment when it could have been a transparent individual vote where Nigerians will know where each legislator stands on the matter? Well, I think the issue speaks for itself when you see what has happened with how the senators, questions that have been raised, and rightly so too. But we need to see more of that, where individuals voted with regards to important bills. So that's from Adoga Joseph.
Well, Obaka says, I think the ruling party should do what Nigerians want by allowing electronic transmission of results by INEC alone, because they have powers to do so.
On the same matter, Judge Tomori says National Assembly represents Nigerians. They have the right to amend any part of the Constitution if and when they deem fit. A body that can amend the ground norm has powers to tell INEC what to do, as they are talking on behalf of all Nigerians. Let us not play politics. Let us not play politics to cloud our judgments. Majority will always carry the vote in the democratic government.
Echikeze, talking about electronic transmission, says, I'm more interested in the reason given by the senators and rep members as they voted. Those who voted no gave lack of network coverage in their community as a reason. It's like saying, since we don't have a motorable road in my community, no one should ride a car in Nigeria. This is absurd. Those who voted yes also have a problem. Their main reason is that they want to stand with Nigerians. Standing with Nigerians, in my opinion, is not a reason. Some acceptable reasons for electronic transmission of election results could be transparency, accountability, and integrity of the system, not stand with Nigerians. I think it sounded patronizing to Nigerians. Well, that's from Ejikezi.
Yeah, Kamaldeen says, JAMB is electronically conducting public examinations without recourse to the amendment of the statutory provisions. Electronic transmissions of results is just for efficiency and effectiveness. It is an aid for credibility. Our representatives are not living up to expectations.
Well, we could go on, but then we're completely
Hey,
out
what
of
about
time.
the Bubaka? Come on, it's Sallah.
Yes, but hey, those issues, there are still in so many other things that we need to take charge of. Okay, Abubakar, we have your own as well. It says, what is wrong if electronic transmission is side-by-side complementary to manual transmission, whereas the electoral offices up to the returning officers carry their respective duties up to announcement of results based on the manual process? The electronically transmitted result can be for audit and confirmation purposes.
Mapa?
Well, we'll take Victor's message tomorrow, but thank you so much for watching today. I don't want to have to be the one to pay the fine. Chamberlain will come around.
I thought they said tomorrow never comes.
Thank you for watching. We hope you have a blast in the celebrations. No knockouts. Just have fun. Thank you for watching. I'm out. Welcome yourself.
Have a wonderful rest of your day and Barka da Sallah. I'm Ayo Makinde.
I'm Chamberlain, so have a happy holiday.